I'd like to call to order the Middletown City Council meeting for Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. This is being held partially virtually as well as in person. We have two council members attending virtually via Zoom. If we could start with a moment of meditation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll for us?
Ms. Vittori.
Here.
Ms. Nenny.
Here.
Mr. Moon.
Here.
Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Condrey.
Here. Okay, this evening we're going to start with a public hearing for historic landmark designations.
Lisa Corso is going to be presenting this evening.
Very good.
Good evening. The first hearing is for the historic landmark designation. The Middletown Historic Commission recommends to the Middletown City Council to expand the Highlands Historic District with the local historic designation of the properties located at 500, 502, and 504 the Alameda, Middletown, Ohio 45044. Parcel IDs are Q65410100000014 and ending in 013 and ending in 012. The properties are a total of approximately 50.51 acres. The Historic Commission recommended approval of the local historic designation of 500, 502, and 504 to expand the Highlands Historic District to the Middletown City Council at the regular meeting held September 17th of 2020. Staff analysis is that the home was constructed in 1893 and was originally known as the John Happisburger House. Per the owner's information and records that they've obtained, the home is one of the oldest properties on the Alameda and in the neighborhood. Planning and Zoning Department staff recommended approval of the expansion of the Highlands Historic District to include the properties located at 500, 502, and 504 due to the property owners giving their consent and applying for their properties to be included in the Highlands Historic District. Planning staff agreed that the supporting documents identify the properties' historical significance in context with the existing Highlands Historic District, and it was an appropriate addition. Planning staff also recommended approval of the expansion due to the designation meeting the criteria outlined in 1212.02 of the Middletown Development Code, designation of a historic landmark or historic district. Documents used to make the recommendation are the application and supporting documents submitted by the property owners, Highlands Historic Homes Inventory, and the Middletown Development Code. Meeting notices were sent to all property owners within the Highlands Historic District, and no objections or comments have been received at this time for the proposed expansion. And you can see in the map, the star is where that additional historic designation would fall. Any questions? Moving on to the next. The Middletown Historic Commission recommends to the Middletown...
Should we open this one up for comments in favor of prior to moving on to the next?
surely.
I think they're two separate public hearings. So
Sure, okay.
Sure. So that will open the floor right now to any comments in favor of the first historic landmark designation that was just presented. Okay, do we have any comments in opposition? Okay, we'll close the public hearing on the first item for historic landmark designation and open it for the second one.
Okay, thank you. The Middletown Historic Commission recommends to the Middletown City Council to expand the South Main Historic District with the local historic designation of the property located at 812 South Main Street, Middletown, Ohio 45044. The parcel ID is Q6521012000065. The property is a total of approximately .21 acres. The Historic Commission recommended approval of the local historic designation of 812 to expand the South Main Street District to the Middletown City Council at the regular meeting held on October 15th of 2020. As soon as I find my spot. And I'm missing a page. Okay. Planning and Zoning Department staff recommended the approval of the expansion of the South Main Historic District to include 812 South Main Street. Planning staff recommended approval because the property owner gave consent and applied to have her property included in the South Main Historic District. The property located at 808 South Main was constructed in 1875 and is already historically designated and included in the South Main Historic District. If approved, the property at 812 South Main would be consolidated with 808 for an approved home addition. Planning staff has also recommended approval of the expansion, as the building addition will add to the preservation of the existing home style and character. The Historic District expansion process followed the criteria outlined in the Middletown Development Code, Chapter 1212.02, designation of a historic landmark or historic district. The documents used to make recommendation were the application and supporting documents submitted by property owner Jacqueline Phillips, South Main Street Historic Homes Inventory, and Middletown Historic Preservation Plan, as well as the Middletown Development Code. Meeting notices were sent to all the property owners within the South Main Historic District, and no objections or comments have been received at this time for the proposed expansion. That concludes that.
Thank you for the presentation. That'll open the floor to any comments in favor of the second historic landmark designation just presented. Okay, do we have any comments in opposition to the historic landmark designation? Okay, that will close our public hearing for both historic landmark designations. Thank you to our staff for the presentation. Appreciate it. Next, we have a presentation from Warren County Community Services, Miss Amy Hoopy. Okay, Amy, thank you. Come on up to the dais for us.
Thank you. So I have to be honest and say I wasn't quite sure I was going to be doing a presentation, but I will tell you that Warren County Community Services is a non-for-profit organization seeking tax exemption on a property that we purchased in 2017. The address is 6141 Market Avenue, Middletown, Ohio. We serve Meals on Wheels meals out of this location. We have been serving Butler County for the last, I believe, probably more than 3 years, probably four years. It came to our attention that there was a need in Butler County to serve the individuals, and since we were so close in location, we took that upon ourselves to do that. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have on our request for this tax exemption.
Do you know what percentage of the clients that you have are within Middletown proper?
Percentage-wise, no. I do know I can tell you that we have about 1,200 clients total, and we have about 100 to 120 clients that are Butler County clients.
You said 100 to 120 are Butler County?
Approximately, yeah.
Okay, and where are the remainder from?
Warren County.
Warren, okay, so the rest of them are all Warren County? Or?
Yes.
And is Middletown the only city you serve in Butler County?
I'm sorry, say that
Is
again?
Middletown the only city you serve in Butler County?
No, we actually have several zip codes that we serve. And I brought them with me. So we serve Middletown, Liberty Township, Monroe, Trenton, Germantown, Fairfield, which has a couple zip codes, Hamilton, Fairfield, Rossville, Indian Springs, Hamilton, I said that, Overpeck, 7 Mile, and Shandon. So we have quite a bit of territory in Butler County.
Not a question, but just a comment. I was in the building prior to you all buying it, and I was at the open house several years ago, and you did an amazing job renovating that and making good use of a space that had been for sale for probably 10 years. It's amazing how many trucks you can fit in the back part of that.
Yeah, so we've all of our vans are inside. For those of you that haven't been there, we utilize the garage for our parking of our vans back there, so our drivers don't have to be out in the weather when they load and unload their vans. So the building is actually, it fits our needs very well.
Have you seen an increase in the number of clients that you serve this year, particularly due to the pandemic and just the
Yes.
impact that has?
Yes, our operation has changed significantly since probably about the middle to the end of March. We have taken on quite a few new clients. I can tell you in June, that one statistic sticks in my mind. We took on 130 new clients in the month of June. That was our highest month of increase. Now keep in mind, we do lose clients because most of our clients are elderly, so there's a fluctuation there. But we have what we call new starts on a daily basis. And our commitment to the community is we turn no one away. We don't have a wait list. Some organizations that provide meals do put people on wait lists, and we don't have a wait list. If they are approved to get meals, we take them to them.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much, Amy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That brings us to our citizen comments. That, by the way, that's legislation item number 24 this evening. It's a first reading. And the two public hearings are legislation items 21 and 22 on the agenda tonight, also first readings, just for everyone's reference, so you can sort through everything. Do we have any citizen comments this evening?
I did not receive any comment cards in person. I did receive an emailed comment. It's up to council to, I saw a lot of emails. I did not see any I didn't get any directive on what I'm supposed to do with this emailed comment, so I'll leave it up to council how they want to handle that.
Was it directly requested that the email comment be read tonight?
The opening line says, Amy, I would appreciate having this entered into citizens' comments tonight at the council meeting. So yes, it was specifically emailed for tonight's council comments.
I think.
Or, I'm sorry,
it was
citizens'
an
comment.
email, but it wasn't directly requested, so I wasn't sure about that.
Right.
Are we referencing even the same? I don't even know if it's the same topic. I mean, I think council members know my opinion. I believe that if we have council members who are able to dial in remotely and speak, that we don't have a way for our citizens to do that. And so I do believe we should be accepting these, but I'm not sure everyone feels that way. So I guess we could put it to vote. Is that appropriate? Without even knowing the topic, I think that's fair.
I apologize for interrupting, but I would suggest if you would like to, it would be appropriate if you would like to motion to waive the rules for commenting for this particular situation, and it would need to be a majority vote of council.
I motion that we waive the rules for citizen comments for this particular situation.
Just for tonight?
For tonight, and then we can address it for the next meeting as we need to.
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Gay, could you please call the roll?
Who was the second?
Oh, yeah.
Joe was the second. I'm sorry, Mr. Mulligan was the second.
Ms. Gay, could you please call the roll for us?
Miss Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
You're muted, Amy.
Ms. Vittori, you're on mute.
Yes.
so I'll go ahead and read this then.
Thank you. And I'll put a timer to it for us as well.
Madam Mayor and council members, at the last city council meeting, it was announced that the city was awarding funds associated with the facade grant program. For many of us, this was the first we had heard that funding was still available or that the application process had even begun, much less been finalized. We are concerned that this process was reinstated without a clear announcement to all downtown stakeholders by the city and has apparently been conducted without a clear set of guidelines. Additionally, the funds do not appear to be used in the traditional manner. The city has suffered from a reputation of council and staff taking care of friendly interests for far too long. The ordinances 2020-55, 56, 57, 58 before you tonight perpetuate the perception of insider knowledge and taxpayer funds being used for a select group without the transparency and openness demanded by citizens. I want to assure all of you that this is not a personal attack on any member of council. However, the overall look of these proposed ordinances feeds a narrative that already exists about our city government. I strongly urge that these ordinances be tabled or defeated until an open, transparent process can be established. No funding of any project should move forward until all stakeholders with other worthy projects have been allowed by the city to participate. To move forward at this time without such transparency will do nothing but prove the city deserves its reputation for deciding who the winners and losers will be. This is sent in by Joe Whitman, 1504 North Braille Boulevard, Middletown. That's the only comment I received emailed.
Okay, thank you. And we have no comments from in person. That'll bring us to council comments. So let's go ahead and start remotely. Ms. Vittori, would you like to start us off?
I have no comments, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, thank you to staff for allowing and coordinating this remote participation. I realize the one downside of this is we had to postpone the pinning ceremony for Fire Captain Brian Wright and then new Lieutenant Billy Owens. So I hope that in the future we can reschedule this and have a pinning ceremony where we all can participate. And then as council probably will discuss, how are we going to move in the near term, whether we're going to meet in person, which obviously all of us would like to do, but with the pandemic and the protocols, there are many reasons to try to use technology and meet remotely and just try to keep everyone safe. I know the school board in Middletown is still doing remote meetings. Monroe City Council, I believe, is. All of our boards and commissions also are using the Zoom technology. So I hope that council can have some discussion on that, on how we would like to proceed as our council meetings. I know the downside is that we don't have the citizen input directly during citizen comments for people to come in person, but I would encourage anybody with concerns, please email Amy Skank, our clerk of council, or you can email us directly. And usually we can get a resolution to your question or your problem by email or phone, and we can do it very quickly and get you connected to the right members of staff. So appreciate the accommodation and look forward to working with council and figure out how we're going to move forward with the next few months. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Moon?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, it's election day, so we got an hour and a half or so, 2 hours left in voting. I just wanted to remind everybody to get out and wish good luck to all the candidates out there. Win or lose, it's not easy to run that race, and I wish you all the best. Lastly, I just wanted to extend my heartfelt sympathies to Dora Bronson on the loss of her husband, Lafayette. Dora was a colleague of ours for a number of years and was on city council, and Lafayette often sat right there taking in the council meetings when he was healthy enough, and was a veteran and served our country. So we thank him for his service, and we will miss him. And that's all I have.
Ms. Nettie?
Only to echo the sentiments about the few moments we have left to get out and vote, and encourage everyone to do that. And I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I did speak with Dora, and she asked that I share some details, and this is what she asked that I share with everyone, and I also send my condolences to her and their entire family. She said Lafayette Bronston, for whom the city of Middletown has been branded a Purple Heart City, passed away on Friday, 30 October, at his home. From my words, we're eternally grateful for his service and also the service of his family to our nation. Dora shared with us that his graveside service is Friday, the 6th of November at 9:30 a.m. at the Dayton VA. She did share that Dora is not a morning person, however, Lafayette was, so this must have been his way of sticking it to her because she wanted to do an afternoon ceremony. So, the American Legion is also hosting a ceremony at 1 p.m. on Friday as well. And I'd just like to remind everyone that if you do plan to attend, please be sure that you wear masks and practice social distancing as respectfully as possible, given the pandemic. The other thing, so segueing into COVID, obviously the spread of COVID is increasing. We're all making our plans for the holidays, and I am personally realistic and understand that people are not necessarily going to avoid contact with their family. While we can request that, it's not entirely realistic to do that for everyone. So I just want to have everybody start to think, what does the holiday look like for your family, and what can you do to mitigate the spread of COVID over the holidays? Maybe that's testing as soon as possible, like right last minute before you go visit your family. And again, when you come back, that will help us slow the spread so that we're quarantining appropriately. And also remember that the masks are actually working in public quite a lot. It seems like from the Department of Health, where their contact tracing is finding that the majority of COVID cases are being contracted in social situations when we are letting that guard down. So in public, we are not trustworthy of enough and wearing our masks, but of course we're somehow letting our guard down around our friends and family who, that's seemingly how it's spread more than anything. I think in Butler County, they just recently cited that we're doubling cases every 35 days, which is actually a slower rate than some other areas. However, it's still obviously a large percentage of the people contracting it, and it's growing. So just keep that in mind. The governor asked that we help spread that message to wear those masks. So thank you guys for everything everyone's doing. Okay, that brings us to our city manager reports. Mr. Palaniuk, what do you have for us this evening?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, I do have a number of items for you this evening. First of all, we are asking that your agenda be slightly amended this evening. Item number 5, which is Ordinance 2020-58. There is an amendment in front of you to make that a straight second reading, a non-emergency. We don't believe that actually requires emergency legislation, so that will then be changed to the non-emergency. I wanted to provide an update on the Lincoln School demolition. In this case, we're going to be using CDBG funding to do the demolition. Now, because we'll be using that source of funding, that triggers certain federal requirements. Now, this is a building that, because of its age and its use, we are required to complete a historical impact study, and that's called a Section 106 review. Now, that has actually taken us a number of months to complete, and that was kind of extended because there were some local objections. But as a result of that process, we have reached an agreement with the Ohio Historic Preservation Office that the demolition can move forward. We do have 2 requirements, though, when that happens, and that is that we will have to salvage anything that is historically appropriate, and we will also have to put up an historic marker. Now, that programmatic agreement that was put together as a result of that also requires federal sign-off. So that has gone on to the feds. That's actually been in their hands for about 4 weeks. Sometimes it's just difficult to get their attention, so we resent that again today to make it clear that we need that to move along. We're really hoping that we'll get that sign-off literally any day. There's no reason that they shouldn't. In the meantime, we're finalizing our request for proposals, and that'll be a sort of a 2-phased approach, but they'll happen simultaneously, and that is number 1, the salvage and the auction of those historical elements, as well as the demolition. So we feel like just as soon as we can get that federal sign-off, the RFP will go out, there'll be a limited time for responses from vendors, and then we'll get that demolition started. So we're really hoping that that demolition will yet get started this year and we'll move along quickly. Second update I wanted to provide you, it was requested that I look at the First National Bank building, which the city owns at 2 North Main. Now that building is actually a bigger, more substantial building than the Getz Tower. One could argue it has greater potential in terms of unit count if it ultimately gets adaptively reused as residential. So given that, we would really think that there's a lot greater value and potential that will come to our chances to get that developed at a greater investment rate and greater return on our investment specifically if we first see that the Getz Tower gets moving along. So we're focusing on making certain that that financing gets finalized and that the project gets moving and that leases get signed so that a market is proven, and with a proven market, there'll be much greater potential. Also, in the winter and during a pandemic would be a bad time. So looking at that, we'll be looking to secure the building in the meantime, make certain that it's not in danger of any further deterioration, and that also that it is not in jeopardy, or that it is not jeopardizing other buildings that might be next to it. So that's the approach we'll be taking there. Also wanted to mention a little bit further background on items number 1 through 5 on our agenda this evening. We have talked about these as being so-called UDG grants, and UDG actually stands for Urban Development Action Grant. It was a program that was funded back in the 70s by the federal government, largely to provide sources of federal revenues to older urban core communities, for communities that were experiencing disinvestment and blight, primarily in their downtown areas. And it funded things that would bring economic recovery back to those areas. This program has long since expired. It's went away. So the funds that we have, that we're referring to as UDG, were really first acquired in that manner, but there is no longer any restrictions attached to those dollars. So while we reference this as UDG, there is no requirements attached to UDG to the funding, and any and all requirements that we've placed on them are our own based on policy. There was also some question, particularly related to the one item, number 5 at 1044 Central, whether or not residential is an issue if you're using these funds. As I said, number 1, we no longer have the requirements of UDG, but even if you look back, research historically on the UDG uses, they actually did allow for residential uses. And in fact, I think in 1979, there was a big project in Dayton, the Arcade project, that was largely residential. In our case, though, we have in each of these agreements a requirement that says 60% of the first floor does have to be commercial, because we are making it clear that we want to promote commercial in these areas, but that does not in any way preclude residential in our agreement. And in fact, particularly downtown, we not only prefer, but we promote residential in the upper levels, so that is not an issue. Another issue that came to be is murals. The issue specifically, do they require specific types of permits? And unless a mural is placed on a building within a historic district, we would not require currently any type of permit unless the mural itself is determined to be a sign. But in order to be a sign, it would have to have some type of a verbiage, some type of branding or identified logo. And without that, it is an expression of art, it is a mural. So in the case of item number 5, that is just a mural, it is not a sign, it did not require any permit, so it is fully in compliance. I also wanted to note, in addition, some of the question about the process that was used for determining some of these grants and are they the best use or would there be other money available for others. The good news is that we do expect quite a bit of additional funding that's going to be made available for small business grants in the very near future. Specifically, we have received additional community development block grant funds that we're going to be making available in forgivable loans, which essentially are grants, that you'll be having an action item on your next city council meeting for, that we'll be finalizing all of the things attached to that should provide for around $200,000 in additional small business grants for our community. Also, following closely on the heels and probably about at the same time, and literally we should find about it any day, our expectation is that Butler County will also be providing allocations of some of their CARES Act grants to each of the jurisdictions in Butler County. And in the case of Middletown, we expect to receive about $212,000 to also provide additional small business grant monies or grant loans through the CARES Act. So in those two sources alone should be over $400,000 of additional small business assistance loans made available through the CARES Act. Also, Warren County recently made it clear that they had $700,000 for businesses within Warren County. So part of our community and part of the businesses we have are in Warren County. They're eligible for those funds. And then thirdly, if you approve the budget tonight and beginning in 2021, we'll also have some additional budgeted small business grants within our economic development program. So there are quite a number of opportunities. I would just say to people, please contact our economic development, let them know what your needs are, and they will absolutely walk you through any or all of these programs if you are eligible, and we'll do everything we can to assist people in trying to get the money. We want to make sure that it goes out, and there are timelines so that it be spent expeditiously. So we do think it's very important that those dollars go out. And that really was the things that I wanted to highlight for this evening, unless there are any specific questions.
I had a question. Just wanted to make sure that it's been run through either the law department or Frostbound Todd, that given some of the close relationships, that these are eligible uses and we're good to go on that.
On the UDG?
You're speaking of the UDG grants? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
Run through.
Okay. And then the second question I had, it seems to have been inferred from a couple folks that maybe there was inappropriate influence in some of these grant applications. I just wanted to ask publicly, was there, I assume there was no inappropriate influence, and if there was, I would hope you would share it with us tonight.
Yeah, there was in fact no influence of any kind that I know of. It was really driven exclusively by staff. It was about trying to get these dollars reinvested where they made the greatest amount of difference and value, and where they really assisted in buildings or businesses that were needed them and could put them to work right away.
Thank you.
I have one more question on that. Are the UDG grant funds, is there an expiration date on those?
They would have liked us to have spent them previously. I don't believe there is a formal expiration date, but this is a program that ended years ago, and so they would like, most grantees have closed out their programs by now.
Okay, so there's no expiration date currently set in writing. Thank you.
No.
Is there in any way a kind of penalty that the government looks at when they say, okay, you're applying for new grants, but you still have money available that you haven't spent yet? Is that something that can influence the need to use this money right away, or?
It happens with some programs. For instance, federal government, you could say maybe the FAA may have, or certain types of CDBG entitlement grants or things like that. But in this case, again, the program is long gone. There's really no program at all. No one is following up, no one is auditing, and it's not attached to anything else. For all intents and purposes, these dollars are the city's dollars. What the city does with them at this point is entirely up to us and our policy.
Okay, with that, let's move on to the consent agenda. Ms. Skank, would you mind presenting that for us?
For your consideration this evening, we have to receive and file board and commission minutes from the Airport Commission, September 16th, October 21st, November 18th, 2019, and January 20th, February 24th, and March 16th, 2020, and the Board of Health minutes from September 8th, 2020. To receive and file an oath of office for Jamie Hurley, to confirm the promotional appointments of Billy Shane Owens to the position of Fire Lieutenant and Brian Wright to the position of Fire Captain in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire, and to approve the purchase of 3 new Ford Explorers off the ODAS contract for the Division of Police in the total amount of $98,187 from Lebanon Ford.
I move to approve the issues and actions set forth in the consent agenda.
Second?
Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll for us?
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Okay, and unfortunately, we had to postpone the pinning ceremony for this evening, so we're going to move on and do that another time, hopefully. That brings us to the motion agenda.
To approve a contract for police towing services with Mark Kakaris, doing business as Mark's Towing of Middletown, Ohio, in the amount of $100 per tow for the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2022. This contract includes a lease of the land at 3500 Terry Drive to Mr. Kakaris to operate his towing business and for the secure storage of impounded vehicles.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
And item B, to authorize a transfer of property to adjacent property owners through the vacant side lot program. The address at 118 Harrison Street for $500 to Lauren Watts, and the property on Logan Avenue for $919.75 to Jason and Elizabeth Browning.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Cohen will be presenting the legislation this evening.
Thank you, ma'am. Prior to getting started this evening, we do have a few matters we're asking you to consider as an emergency. So it asks for a motion to amend the requirements for 2 readings and 30 days to enactment. Apologize, speaking one area. With regards to Resolution R 2020-31, Ordinance O 2020-55, Ordinance O 2020-56, O 2020-57, O 2020-59,
And the last one.
I believe we also have O 2020-64, O 2020-65, and O 2020-76.
I move that the charter provision requiring readings on 2 separate days be waived and that the previously read resolutions and ordinances be declared emergencies and read one time only.
Second?
Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
No.
The first matter of legislation will be Resolution R 2020-31, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Middletown, counties of Butler and Warren, state of Ohio for the period ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Do you have any comments about this?
Mayor, if you would, I think these are the UDAG grants, and I appreciate the feedback that I received from the community on this, and I think it's fine that there is some questions that were raised about the process, and I appreciate also the comments that Mr. Palahniuk made, that this is certainly not the end, it's not the beginning of the helping hand that city government is offering to downtown businesses or businesses throughout the community. Just in recent months, we've had grants of various sizes to Babs Kayaking, to White Dog Distillery, to Annie Up Boutique for signage, other projects. I think tonight's agenda includes a grant request for a $75,000 Ohio Department of Natural Resources grant that's going to benefit the operators of the kayaking business. So we're here to help. There are more funds on the way. I would encourage, as Mr. Palahniuk said, if there are businesses, if there are property owners that are looking for a helping hand to make their business better, to increase employment, we're all for it. The city is here to help. Our economic development director was hired to hit the ground running, and I appreciate the speed with which she has moved to try to deploy these funds. Again, if it's not a perfect process, we can work harder to make it perfect so that everybody feels included and has an opportunity. But Mr. Palahniuk, again, with $400,000 coming in, I think we can make a real impact, whether it's downtown or businesses throughout the community. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just to reiterate my comment from our last meeting, that I believe it's appropriate for me to abstain from 1 through 5 here, just because of my connection to downtown. If that seems appropriate to legal, I guess I'm not sure how far my connection to downtown is meant to extend. I guess that's the difficult thing for me, you know. Two of these pieces directly benefit my landlord. I didn't even know that we were going to be receiving any assistance at my location until this legislation came to all of us. So I guess I don't know if there's any recommendation for appropriateness and how far my connection to this extends through all 5 items, or just the items that are directly connected to my current landlord.
If you're asked for a recommendation, I believe your immediate obligation is to abstain from those relating to your landlord, but not the remaining legislation. But I will tell you that when there is a question of ethics, your judgment is the best and only one that matters. And if you feel compelled that you need to abstain, then that's what you need to do.
Thank you.
I wanted to just kind of dovetail off of Mr. Mulligan's comments, and I'm also thrilled about the additional grant loans that are coming available, but I still want to ensure that the accountability of processing for those, though, that have been presented to us, and because I want to ensure that we're setting the right precedents. And so I also applaud staff for recognizing these funds are available and making the efforts to put them to use. I believe we missed the mark on execution of the distribution, however. The process did lack transparency and equality in its selection. It was focused 100% on downtown when it did not have to be. And to date this year, from the information provided by Economic Development, unfortunately, it looks like we've only had 18 businesses in the entire city engage with economic development enough to facilitate a project intake form, which was stated as the pool from which these applications were pulled and selected. And within that pool, we only allowed downtown businesses to be considered, which is, like we said, not a required use of the funds, as Mr. Palaniuk mentioned, any longer. They could be used in other areas other than downtown, unlike initially presented to council. So I don't plan to approve the transfer of the funds nor the distribution of the funds to any of the projects this evening, because I would like to see a more robust application review and grant award process put into place for the funds. As I understand, we're not in a position to lose the grant money yet, and we just stated there's no expiration date on this at this time. And in fact, I find the emergency nature of the legislation, quite honestly, an abuse of what really should only be used in critical situations, of which I do not find this one. I believe a few of the projects put forth in these legislation items are wonderful and the exact type of projects we should be supporting. And if we end up refloating the applications, I really hope that these building owners reapply because they're absolutely warranted. But I do want to reiterate my support of economic development, of Ms. Lyons' work and her efforts with small businesses, and I really hope we're able to more fully engage the entirety of our small business community through increased communications and awareness. I know she's making the efforts. She's telling people to call her. I think the message just isn't being heard enough, and I would like to figure out how we can get that message out there so that we have more than 18 businesses contacting our economic development department, and we can get the funds out on a larger scale and more equally. Do you have any other comments about this?
Mayor, if I may, I do want to caution just council in general. Our charter guidelines and those guardrails that are in place, I do have concerns about, any council member getting involved in operations of the city. And again, just take that with a word of caution. We do have the charter safeguards, guardrails put in place for a reason, and that we as council members aren't to be directing staff and necessarily second guessing every tactic or strategic decision. We are the board of directors of the city, not the city managers.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. I appreciate that comment. I also feel, though, I've heard enough comments from our citizens since the last reading that it was my duty to raise this issue and how this was facilitated. And overall, this has been an issue that's been raised over and over in our city, accountability of use of funds. And I want to make sure that we're doing that and we have the transparency to our citizens. And this is just one small way of just saying, hang on, let's pause, just take a second look at this, revisit it, and get it back out to the people who need the money.
I agree that it's always good to take into account anytime you have feedback, positive or negative. But again, this is not the first time in recent past that the council has had before it some grant applications and requests and authorizations that Ms. Lyons brought to us. And I'm trying to figure out how this is different from the grants to Annie Up Boutique, to White Dog Distillery, or to Babs Kayaking, just 3 examples that we've had in the past. I'm trying to reconcile them.
Yeah,
What is the?
I think that's a good point. And in my opinion, this didn't become something that looked like an issue with accountability and until I saw them as a group and they were put forth as emergency legislation. And now we're looking at the application process because there's a group of them. And just because something was done a certain way in the past doesn't mean we have to continue things that way. If we're finding that we're going down a path of a lack of accountability, we need to stop, just have a look at it and fix it going forward. We can't change anything in the past, but we can change right here and now and how we move forward.
Mr. Palahniuk, can you speak to the process at all?
Yeah, and I certainly have heard the comments about process, and I think we're always looking at process to make sure that it's as fair and as transparent as possible, and that we offer people equal kinds of opportunity to these resources. So clearly, we're hearing that message, and I think as you see us bring grant programs forward in the future, we will be a lot more cognizant of that issue. In every case where we can provide opportunities, where there will be a very clearly defined and communicated process by how you apply, a time frame for application, the sort of rules and restrictions attached to the application, how those applications would be scored, and how awards would be prioritized, and then follow through on those awards with that sort of prioritized scoring. That's the best possible way because people know in advance, what's available, how they might be eligible, what they have to do to remain eligible, and what chances they are having for award based on what they apply for. So when we have those opportunities and the time is available, we're going to try very hard to make sure that happens. So we're hearing this issue. Economic development also tends to be but for. The idea is you provide it to those entities that only but for the grant itself can move forward because it's made a difference. So we keep that in mind as well. So I think, we will always continue to refine our processes to make them not only more fair, but more transparent, and to make them as impactful as they can be to the community. So that message is out there. We're going to do everything we can to make sure, particularly as you see some of these additional funds come forward.
And I'd like to just remind ourselves that we're not always going to agree on everything. I mean, we're here to represent the citizens, and Lord knows our citizens do not always agree on everything. So we're here to represent the citizens. And just because my opinion tonight happens to be different from my fellow council members, I think that diversity in opinion is our strength, and it's how we move forward and make good decisions together. So I just want to remind us we're representing the people, and the people do have differences in opinions, and that's okay.
And I would just add one more comment, whether it be a grant like this, a small local grant, or a large job creation tax incentive type of program, we pick our staff and empower them to go out and make decisions and recruit businesses and negotiate deals. And we cut their legs out somewhat when we second guess every decision they make. It's our job to second guess it in some ways, but we have to make sure that they feel empowered to go out and recruit new businesses for Middletown. So we just need to keep that in mind as we move forward and more projects come before us.
Yes.
If I may also with economic development is sometimes, there has to be negotiations involved. you have an item this evening you're going to deal with at the end of the agenda, number 25, that there's no real grant program for, but through negotiations, we were able to create a kind of partnership that we think is going to redevelop our sort of tired old mall. And we've created funds that will be available to do some master planning. It's not a grant, but it's us committing to spend money, and it wasn't part of a program. So there has to be enough flexibility sometimes to just say, hey, sometimes it looks different. It wasn't made available to everybody, but it's really important to make something really impactful happen. So long as we also consider the fact that sometimes it's just going to sort of be different, there will need to be flexibility, and we have to negotiate parts of it.
Thank you. Are there any motions this evening that anyone would like to make any of the other items 1 through 5 a non-emergency? Is that an option that anyone would like to entertain? I throw that out there because for voting reasons, I think people understand what emergency legislation means. If we have people who are abstaining, there's also ramifications for that. So I'm just leaving that to the floor for any council members who have any thoughts on that.
I'm just going to provide some information. This happened several years ago. It had not happened in a really long time. But we actually printed this up, so if it came up again, we knew what we were dealing with.
Okay, great, thank you.
Article 4, Section 1 of the city charter requires the affirmative vote of the majority of members of city council shall be necessary to adopt any motion, ordinance, or resolution. On the passage of every ordinance or resolution, the vote shall be taken by yeas and nays and recorded upon the journal. This section requires the affirmative vote of 3 members of the present council in order to take any action. An abstention is an acquiescence and is not an affirmative action or step. It is, by its very nature, inaction. A motion and legislation require 3 affirmative votes to pass. Emergency legislation requires 4 affirmative votes to pass.
I'm comfortable with all of them being regular. I think 5 was different because the work had been done and there was not a seasonal issue around it. I think we would need to hear from staff if it was an emergency because they were trying to get the work in before the ice and snow hit.
I mean, and I think with that being said too, I mean, my hesitation in voting on issue number 1 was that I felt like they were all connected, but without a vote on that issue, which isn't necessarily directly connected to my landlord per se, I would feel more comfortable voting for that, knowing that my inaction might have a negative impact on the other people who are applying for this money and who might be very positively impacted by it.
That first piece of legislation, it simply is an appropriation. It's not the benefit of your business associate.
Not directly.
And in the absence of its approval, we can't fund, obviously, the remainder. So it's seminal to the others because it's appropriating the dollars that would become available to do the others.
So one other thing, just as we move through this, on item number R 2020-31, we have a first and a second. So before we do anything else, we sort of need to do something with this piece of legislation before we decide to make the others non-emergencies or whatever we decide to do.
So at the current time, this legislation item number 1 is considered an emergency vote because we voted previously to make it as such. I'm hearing perhaps that's an okay thing for this current piece of legislation. Does everyone feel comfortable voting on this?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll figure out what's next. Ms. Skank, you please call the roll.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vittori.
Yes.
It does pass.
Thank you. And if any council members would like to revisit emergency legislation, designations for any other legislation items this evening, please feel free to make motions if you wish to.
Your Honor, just one question for staff. I know that in the reports, the point of deploying the monies now had to do with, the seasons changing and getting the jobs done before December 1st, which I think was going to be the normal course if it's a non-emergency. To Ms. Lyons or to Mr. Palaniuk, do you have any opinion on that? If these are converted to just regular legislation items?
I do believe that our original intent for emergency was in fact precisely what you indicated, Councilman Mulligan, and that is the concern over the weather. For instance, with 4, that's the payment toward a roof, and a roof, that doesn't get put in prior to a winter season could become problematic for that building. The other cases, they are some, facade work, lighting, landscaping, back trellis, signage, things like that, that are much better served doing while the weather still is reasonable before it, becomes a winter season. So that was clearly the original intent for the emergency.
I believe I saw work being done on the facade on one of these buildings already. Do we know if some of the work on any of these have been completed aside from number 5?
Chriselle, are you familiar with that? I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are not, we're not upfronting the money. The money will be given to the business owners after the work is complete. So I think that's important to know. The work has to be done. I think we're giving them 4 to 6 months to complete it, but the whole idea was to make an immediate impact. And I also want to point out that this was not the facade grant program revisited. These were small business grants that were bigger than our traditional little micro lending grants. So no different than White Dog, no different than the BMW store. You don't score those types of grants. You work with the businesses individually.
So hearing what Ms. Lyons said, these are reimbursable grants, but these particular businesses have been operating from the belief that they would be approved. Therefore, they moved forward believing they would wind up having the ability to be reimbursed. So while it may not have the same sense of emergency to approve it, there would be a certain belief that it does get approved because they are relying on it. They are but for in the sense that they sort of have operated from the belief that they will get the ability to get this funding.
But I think the only difference right now, this is a second reading emergency. So if we made it non-emergency, this is still a second reading. We still have a vote. And the outcome of that vote, it's just dependent on the funds. I believe, Amy, is how you explained it to me when I asked at the beginning, was that in 30 days from now, the funds would then be available to give them. However, there would be no delay. I mean, they would know right away after today whether it's approved or not. And seeing it as a reimbursable grant, they're already having to spend the money. They can go ahead and do the projects. And 30 days from now, the funds are available.
It's actually 31 days.
31,
Yes.
all right.
Yeah, so the charter says 31 days after the motion or the legislation is approved, then it becomes effective, yes.
Okay, so it's not actually delaying any projects if we made them non-emergency.
Yeah, so having heard that it could take 2 to 4 months for them to complete, I'd make the motion that items O-2020-55, O-2020-56, and O-2020-57 be read a second time and not be declared an emergency.
Second.
Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vittori.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're squared away and can continue with the next legislation item. Thank you, everyone.
I will head to the second one then. Our next matter is Ordinance O-2020-55, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a UDG grant agreement with Triad Investment Group LLC for the property located at 1126 Central Avenue, and we will now strike the declaring an emergency portion of the.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Do we have any comments specifically about this item? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vittori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Abstain.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
It does pass.
The next matter is Ordinance O-2020-56, An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a UDAG grant agreement with Larry Lewis, trustee and Triad Investment Group LLC for the property located at 1212 and 1218 Central Avenue and declaring an emergency. Well, that will be strict.
Not declaring an emergency.
And not declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Abstain.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
It does pass.
The next matter is ordinance O-2020-57, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a UDAG grant agreement with Danielle LLC for the property located at 5 South Canal Street. We will strike declaring an emergency from the title.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
No.
That does pass.
Next matter will be ordinance O-2020-58, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a UDAG grant agreement with MLH Developers LLC for the property located at 1044 Central Avenue, previously struck declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vettori.
Abstain.
That does pass.
The next matter is ordinance O-2020-59, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Allied Technical Services Incorporated to complete the August Avenue Lift Station Repair Project and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments on this item? Okay, Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Number 7 is ordinance O-2020-60, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to submit an application for Ohio Department of Natural Resources Paddling Enhancement Grant Program for river access improvements, here tonight for a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments on this one? Mr. Palahniuk, can you, just so that, since this does have to do with, was referenced earlier in the evening, is this something that's, who benefits from this and how? Is this a public access? How would that?
This is the city applying for a DNR paddling enhancement grant to produce river access improvements. We could potentially get as much as $75,000. It is 100% reimbursable, does not require any local match, would be built on city property, would aid recreational boaters, specifically paddlecraft, would be built at Germantown Road and Carmody Boulevard. So in a sense, it's a little boat launch for recreational kayaks, canoes, things like that, that would give greater access to the riverfront.
Okay, so it's a public.
Public access. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Next matter is number 8, ordinance O-2020-61, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an extension of the current contract with Smart Bill Ltd. for the printing and mailing of water bills, here this evening for a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second? Any other comments on this?
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Oh, sorry. That was-
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ganku, oh, sorry.
I got it.
Got it? Okay. Ms. Ganku, please call the roll.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Next matter is number 9, ordinance O-2020-62, An ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an extension of the contract with CBM Managed Services, now known as Summit Food Service, for jail food service in 2021. Here for a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Yes.
Number 10 is ordinance O-2020-63, an ordinance enacting and adopting the 2020 supplement, version S-13, to the codified ordinances of the city of Middletown, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second? Any comments?
Yes, the city, much like most jurisdictions across the country, uses American legal publishing to codify our ordinances as we produce amendments and then to publish those and print them and put them out. So every so often, we do additional supplements to keep up to date with our ordinances. So this particular enactment will codify those state law changes through December 31st of 19, as well as all local ordinance changes that occurred through February 4th of 2020. So you see this type of thing happen regularly. We just continue to update the codified ordinances.
Any comments on that? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Next matter is ordinance O-2020-64, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Air Force One for the installation of data air system with a GPS needlepoint bipolar ionization system and declaring an emergency.
So move for
So
adoption.
move for adoption.
Ms. Moon, did you want to change your?
Second?
Pick one, Amy.
Mr. Moon moved, and then I heard your motion, Mr. Mulligan, so I have a first and a second.
Mr. Moon is completely out of order.
I agree, Joe. I agree.
I will second or make the motion, whichever you need.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments on this?
Yes, this is another example of the city taking advantage of the CARES Act funding. In this particular instance, we are putting in a supplement to the HVAC system within the dispatch center that will better assure that viruses can't either come through or live. It's called, a bipolar ionization system, but in effect, it does a better job of cleaning the air from potential adulterated things like viruses. So the cost is $35,730, fully paid for by CARES Act funding, and it will make the environment in which our dispatchers work a little bit safer.
Never did I think we would be approving a contract with Air Force One in Middletown.
Election night.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
The next matter is ordinance O-2020-65, an ordinance authorizing a contract with Lebanon Ford for the purchase of a Ford Explorer and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second? Any comments, Mr. Polnick?
Yes, in this case, I want to point out that our ordinance listed the one Ford being purchased on behalf of the municipal court. That's incorrect. These are all for the police department. One of these vehicles are as a result of federal coronavirus emergency supplemental funding, so it's coming not through our funding, but from that source. The other two are our normal replacement of police patrol vehicles. So the cost is $32,729 per vehicle for Ford Explorers. The low bidder on the state program is Lebanon Ford. Grand total $98,187. The two replacements, we're replacing in one case a 2010 Ford Crown Victoria In the other case, a 2011 Ford Crown Victoria. So my even saying that lets you know that they're well beyond their useful lives. So we think it's appropriate, and these are budgeted for purchase.
Mr. Palaniuk, there's about $43,000 that is not spent. Was that part of a previous expenditure we had made, or are we still looking for other uses for that for the police department, or?
I'm going to ask Jake to respond to that. I'm sure he has that answer right at the tip of his tongue.
Good evening. Mr. Moon, are you referring to the police coronavirus grant?
Yes.
So they have all of the remainder allocated already. Portion of that is for supplies. They bought I forget the name of it, but some type of machine that cleans the cruisers and disinfects the cruisers. Then a few other miscellaneous smaller items. But this is the big ticket item from that grant.
Okay.
But yes, all of the remainder is already allocated and approved by the Department of Justice.
Great.
And Mr. Palaniuk, it appears that there's a error in the staff report attached to this legislation, which is where the confusion's coming in. So the motion agenda approved earlier in the evening is related to the staff report for the 3 vehicles for police. This particular legislation, Ordinance 2020-65 that we're looking at right now, is in fact for a vehicle for the municipal court. The reason it's legislation, unlike not a motion agenda like the other 3, is due to the funds were not originally budgeted in 2020. So it has to come as legislation for the formal budget approval. But same type of thing, bought off of the ODAS contract, same type of vehicle, same pricing. So no other difference other than we do need the supplemental appropriation in this case. So we will get that corrected on the workbook so that there's no confusion there.
Yeah, my apologies.
And I also believe that at one point I've asked the question about why Lebanon Ford and not Middletown Ford. I guess Middletown Ford is not in the government contracting purchasing group.
It varies year to year. So sometimes Middletown Ford is the winner of the Ohio Department of Administrative Services contract.
Okay.
Other years it's Lebanon. It just depends on who wins the bid that year.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
And maybe this question's been answered in the past, but those Crown Victorias, what happens with them? And whatever they might sell for, that goes back into?
Yeah, so it would go back into wherever the vehicle was originally purchased from. So in this case, these are police vehicles to the Police Depreciation Fund.
They're sold in an online auction.
On
Yeah,
Gov.
sold on GovDeals online auction.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this one? Okay, Ms. King, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vittori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Item number 13 this evening is Resolution R 2020-32, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, Counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio, for the period ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency. This is year-end various fund move, and no action requested until November 17th.
Mr. Palaniuk, do you have any comments about this one?
This is a fairly routine matter, year-end adjustments to appropriations, both supplemental and de-appropriating. In the case of the general fund, it amounts collectively to $117,000. There's a series of others to quite a number of other funds. If you have any specific questions about any of them, Mr. Burton would certainly be more than willing to address those.
No other questions. We'll move on to item 14, Ordinance O 2020-66, an ordinance amending section 1050.07, Stormwater Schedule of Rates of the Codified Ordinances, here for a first reading.
Mr. Palaniuk?
Yeah, item 14 as well as 15, 16, you're going to see these are in effect very much attached to our budget. They involve fee increases. They're contained within the budget, and the budget relies on these. This one, in this case, would be increasing the stormwater rate from $4 per month per ERU to $4.75 per month. It would generate about $375,000 annually. We have not adjusted these rates since 2016, so inflation alone would dictate to some extent that we need to increase funding here. Also, however, in your budget, you will note that we are now providing, through the stormwater utility, the grass cutting for medians. There are also additional reinvestment in various capital items that we're looking for more in the future. And this does then also provide for paying for the curbs associated with paving. So if in fact the pavement levy were to be approved tonight, this would account for paying for that. But if that's the case, then also we would have to be looking in the next couple of years probably to raise it again to make up for some of these other things that we also mentioned.
So to clarify, this is the one that would essentially not directly encumber homeowners for the curb and gutter. It would be a spread out. Is that, or is that a different piece of?
Well, you're referring to whether or not, as part of paving work, a particular homeowner would have to pay a special assessment for the curb in front of their home that might be attached to that pavement. We are saying that in the future, we would like to not have to have that homeowner pay that assessment, that it would be picked up by the stormwater fund. But part of that is the increase in this case that is required because it would be aiding in picking up that cost.
So regardless of the potential assessment factor, we would need to be considering some sort of increase because of all the inflation items you mentioned.
Yes, particularly because of inflation, because of a need to do a number of additional capital improvements, and because we are now recognized that we need to do the grass cutting and the medians from the stormwater fund, because it really is part of stormwater.
Did we consider what it would be if we didn't pick up the assessments, if it was just a standard increase for all the other needs that we need? Do you know?
We didn't do it that way because we were also trying to make certain we could provide for the pavement levy if it was approved. And if it's not, then it does the other things and we wouldn't have to raise it again as quickly in the future.
And then the last comment, because I wouldn't want public to be confused, because I was a little confused, this also wouldn't address assessments related to driveway aprons or sidewalks.
That is correct. That would still be assessed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And can you clarify, I think I remember the staff report saying we started this assessment in 2006 for the first time. Is that accurate? And then it said, but we haven't raised it since 2016. I just want to make sure that those numbers were accurate and wasn't we haven't raised it since 2006. It's really been 2016 was the last raise.
I believe, 2016 was the last time it was raised.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, can move on. Thank you.
Next matter is ordinance O-2020-67, an ordinance amending section 1040.03 of the codified ordinances levying and assessing sewer rates, also here for a first reading.
Oh, Mr. Palahniuk.
This item specifically is an increase to our sewer rates, exclusively tied to providing for the long-term control plan. It would take the minimum rate from $20.89 a month to $21.93 a month, and for senior citizens from $10.44 to $10.96. That's a 5% increase. I believe last year this was a 10% increase. We feel that we can still cover the long-term control plan issues by having it at 5% this year. For a typical user, this would amount to about $1.51 per month increase. And it is consistent with the budget that you're being asked to approve.
Do we plan to continue increasing every year by a substantial amount like that? Is that the plan, or?
I think Mr. Tadish can speak to approximately what those increases look like and how much they have to be to cover the cost of that long-term control plan.
Good evening. So we have increased the rates significantly over the past several years. So I think we are starting to taper down the increases. So a 5% increase is more like a typical yearly increase than what we've seen the last several years. So we'll certainly be taking a closer look at this long-term control plan and the projects associated with it, continuously, and we'll take a closer look at those rates and make sure the increases, that are requested are necessary for those. But at the same time, I think we are on the back end of the big increases at this time. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Scott, it's like a 20-year
25-year
25-year
program.
program. So, and this was kind of the thought process as we went through this in previous years.
Right.
You can raise rates earlier on, you can build a big fund, so you don't have to take these massive jumps in years 5 and 10 and 15 to offset these huge projects. Right. You can raise them lower amounts earlier, you can raise
And we'll also be looking at some financing options down the road. I know now with some of the future potential larger projects, we can look at low-interest loans that are over a much longer period of time versus traditional bonding. Like traditional bonding is like a 20-year program. Now I think the EPA's recognized that, hey, these projects really have a 40 to 50-year lifespan in effect. So one thing we'll be looking at is spreading out some of those future bigger projects over a longer period of time. Therefore, another way to hopefully keep our rates lower or in check or in line with what's equivalent in the region and nationally. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, next.
Next matter is ordinance O 2020-68, an ordinance amending section 1066.07A of the codified ordinances and establishing a new solid waste collection fee. Also here for a first reading.
Mr. Palaniuk.
Yeah, and this item is the increase to solid waste fees. It is currently $15.50 per month. This would take it to $16.50 a month, or $1 per month increase. That's a 6.4% increase. This, of course, is an enterprise fund that only takes in as much as the expenditures. So we are trying to cover the increased costs that we have from our waste contract. And this would do that. It would raise approximately $216,000 per year.
So in summary, Rumpke is increasing its prices, and thus we.
And we have to cover those costs, precisely, yeah.
Ms. Ninny, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I've had some feedback from residents. Certainly this time of year, the yard waste issue becomes greater. And I've heard from residents as well as landscape and lawn care crews that those are not being picked up, that this year happens to be particularly worse than years in the past. And I don't know what the origin of that problem may be, but as we sit here and talk about increasing rates because they're increasing their rates on us, it is just something that I feel like should be mentioned.
We'll certainly look into that. Thank you.
Okay, next. Thank you.
Next matter is ordinance O 2020-69, an ordinance establishing pay ranges, pay policy, and benefits for various salaried and hourly classifications within the service of the city. Here for a first reading.
Mr. Palaniuk.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, these next three items being 17, 18, and 19, each in a sense are putting forth those standard pay ranges, policy, and benefits for each of three separate groups of our employees. With 17, it represents those employees who were hired before January 1st of 2018. With number 18, it's those employees hired after January 1st of 2018. And with number 19, it covers our Department of Health employees. So in each case, it simply covers those standard benefits if there's any minor changes year to year. And it does call for that cost of living increase of 1% plus the step increases, as we have discussed and as is included in the budget before you.
Any questions on this? Okay, next. Thank you.
Next matter is ordinance O 2020-70, an ordinance establishing pay ranges, pay policy, and benefits for various salaried and hourly classifications within the service of the city that are hired January 1, 2018 or later. First reading.
Mr. Palaniuk, did you want to expand on this at all, or?
Nothing further.
Okay, sounds good.
I can wrap in the last one is also related at ordinance O 2020-71, an ordinance establishing pay ranges and certain benefits for employee classifications in the Middletown Department of Health and Environment. Here for a first reading.
Okay, and any comments on that one as well? Okay.
Nothing further.
Thank you.
Number 20 is resolution R 2020-33, A resolution to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, Counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio for the period ending December 31st, 2020. This is the 2021 annual budget here for first reading.
Mr. Pelenick, did you?
Yes,
Your budget, I'm not
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is in fact, of course, your fiscal year 2021 budget as presented to you in 2 different evenings and presentations. The general fund collectively is at $32,994,804. All other funds, which in this case include 57 separate additional funds, tally $112,953,826, so that the city's grand total budget for 2021 is $145,948,630. For the most part, as we have presented now for a number of times, it was a difficult budget. It is, in many cases, down from past years for obvious reasons, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the economic results of that pandemic, and dealing with lower income tax revenues and other things. But I think we did a yeoman's job keeping as many services as we possibly could, keeping all of our employees intact, and really being able to accomplish a lot given the restriction on our resources. So we would be more than happy to entertain any and all questions that might be attached to the budget proposal.
Okay, I'd like to definitely thank staff. I know we have many goals in this city, and we'd love to have 5 times the budget in order to do that. So thank you guys for stretching the dollars as best as possible and finding creative ways about getting the job done and making our city proud. So appreciate that.
We will continue to Ordinance O-2020-72, an ordinance amending the Highlands Historic District to include the properties located at 500, 502, and 504 the Alameda for a first reading. This is matter from the public hearing earlier.
Mr. Pelenick, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think staff did a really good job of presenting these earlier.
Absolutely. Any comments from council? Okay.
Number 22 is Ordinance O-2020-73, an ordinance amending the South Main Street Historic District to include the property located at 812 South Main Street here for a first reading.
Okay, Mr. Pelenick, would you like to add to this one at all? Okay.
No, thank you.
Any comments from council? Okay, thank you.
I just want to,
Sure. Sorry.
just quickly thank the homeowners of both of these properties for taking so much care to, invest in the properties and invest in Middletown and their desire to want to become a part of those historic districts.
I think it also demonstrates when you do reach out to the city, good things can happen, actually. So encourage people to do so.
The next matter, if I may, is Ordinance O-2020-74, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for small business economic development grant with Higher Faculty LLC here for a first reading.
Mr. Pelenick?
Yes, in this case, this is an economic development, small business economic grant that would be going to a business called Higher Faculty LLC. Kind of the story of small town, Middletown boy does well and comes back home, starts business. It's a new age multimedia company. It is not located downtown. It's at 1210 Elliott Drive. In this case, the grant would be assisting with both interior remodeling as well as equipment. There's $2,390 that would be going to help pay for interior remodeling, and then $5,610 that would pay for equipment. The city's property development fund is where the funds come from. It is within our budget, and we do recommend this for approval.
And do we have any comments on how the relationship with Higher Faculty was facilitated and how they were selected for this?
I would ask Director Lyons to comment on that.
We met with Alfredo. He reached out to us. I believe it was Jerry Lewis who recommended that he be in touch with me. She's been a great advocate for our small business program. She's actually referred me to a few different people. We met with him. He came into the city building just an amazing young man. He is a mentor with the Middletown School District and really tries to share his work with everyone. This was part of our small business grant program, so this was scored as such for that, and that's how we came up with the $8,000 grant. This was different than the other 4 that we've been talking about today. I just want to make sure that people understand they were not the same type of programs that we were funding. So this was part of the micro grant that we kind of started this year as a ways to touch as many businesses as we can in this COVID pandemic, trying to be creative and providing outreach with the money that we had.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons, and thank you for all your work with our small businesses. And reach out to her. If you're a small business, clearly good things happen when you reach out to Chriselle, so call Economic Development.
No further questions. We'll move to number 24, ordinance number 02020-75, an ordinance consenting to real property tax exemption pursuant to revised code 5709.121, applicable to property owned by Warren County Community Services, and more particularly described as Warren County Auditor's parcel number 070327700061 and 0732770062. Here for a first reading.
Mr. Palahniuk, would you like to comment about this?
Yes, as you heard earlier this evening from Ms. Hoopy, this property, which is at 6141 Market Avenue, is owned by the Warren County Community Services, and it houses their Meals on Wheels program. It is currently tax exempt as the result of being in the Town Mall Hospital TIF, but at some point that obviously will go away when that expires, and they're seeking that a permanent tax exemption be put into place because, of course, this is government-owned and it is nonprofit. So this would then make the tax exemption for government-owned a priority and make it indefinite as well.
Do we know what the amount is for the property tax?
I didn't hear the question. I apologize.
Do we know the amount of property tax associated with it?
This is
It's currently tax exempt, so
It's been abated because it's in a TIF.
yeah, it doesn't.
What we do is consent to move it to the government side away from the TIF payments.
Okay.
So it's kind of a technicality. It's already tax exempt, but it's tax exempt as a result of being in a TIF. By doing this, we're acknowledging the fact that it's government owned and it should be tax exempt permanent, and it will have the priority for tax exemption as government ownership rather than simply by the fact of being in the TIF.
Any other comments? Okay.
The last matter is ordinance 02020-76, an ordinance authorizing a contract with RINCA for master planning services related to Town Mall Galleria redevelopment project and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Oh, I didn't even realize we were voting on this tonight. Okay, we're voting on this. Mr. Palahniuk, would you like to?
I would. The Town Mall Galleria in town, of course, is a mall that I think everyone is familiar with that has had the same kind of thing befall it as most suburban malls across the country. As brick and mortar retail goes away, it's left with a lot of vacant big box stores and not much in the way of tenancy. And of course, there's always the issue of how do you redevelop these properties? And in this case, all of 31 acres of that property is owned by Mr. George Rageb of California. And he's been working very diligently for quite a number of years trying to make that mall successful, to find new tenants, and or to find a way to redevelop it. And of course, it's been very, very difficult in this environment, as you might imagine, to find new tenants. Retail is simply changing. The way we have malls is going to be very different, and these kinds of projects, in almost every case, are being adaptively reused. So there has been quite a number of efforts over the last couple of years by one particular group to try to work with the owner to make a kind of development plan come together. They were unable ultimately to gain site control, and I think at some point Mr. Rageb in turn wanted to start to redevelop the property on his own, and he has every right to do so. And he wanted to compartmentalize it and start doing it in pieces, for instance, doing an apartment project and then potentially looking at other pieces of it to be either sold or redeveloped over time. And we met with him and said, we think there's a much better way to do this on a master plan basis in which everyone will benefit. The development will happen more completely with greater amount of investment. It will allow him to be successful and move forward, while at a parallel time, others who can also accomplish some major parts of what will be a comprehensive redevelopment can see that occur as well. But it really takes the willingness to say, let's do a total master plan of this project that will incorporate what the owner wants to do while also incorporating what some other people and what the market believes can happen at the same time. So in this case, we are asking City Council to approve a contract with the Rinka architectural firm of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They are nationally recognized architects and land use planners who specialize in both looking at how to adaptively reuse and master plan old malls, as well as designing from scratch new town centers, and then bringing back malls as town centers. So in this case, the contract would have them first do a visioning and programming part to this project initially for $5,000, and then have a two-phase development of master planning, first conceptual plans and then second schematic plans. So in total, the project would be $93,000. It would be shared by the city paying $49,000 of that cost, the owner of the mall, Mr. Rageb, paying $34,000 of that cost, and the Warren County Port Authority contributing $10,000 of that cost. So by having the three partners that are really working to make this successful all contribute to it, we feel like that's just added motivation to make sure that it will be successful. In the case of Warren County Port Authority, they're very interested in assisting in some competitive financing that will allow some projects to happen there. Also, they have some really good connections with some destination sports venue that we think can be a component part of this and can move forward quickly. Together, we think that by doing this, it will ultimately lay out things that the city can really assist in having it move forward, including probably a hotel, probably destination dining, probably other kinds of sports and entertainment things. And then with Warren County's efforts and with the individual owners' efforts, what otherwise would have happened haphazardly and over time and in sequence now can happen as a comprehensive plan and parallel, so that much more investment will occur, and it will occur at a quicker time frame. So we think this is the way to do it. It will happen based on how quickly and motivated the partners are, between 13 and 18 weeks. And by the time that's complete, we'll have a master plan that will then allow everybody to move forward with what we're excited about becoming a really important redevelopment within our community. So with that, we recommend strongly that the City Council approve entering into the contract with Rinka and partnering both with the property owner and with the Warren County Port Authority.
Mr. Palahniuk, have we seen their work in the past, or have you worked with them, or know other municipalities or developers that have worked with them? What sort of testimonials?
Yeah, and thank you for asking. I specifically have worked with them on 2 occasions in Racine, Wisconsin, and oddly enough, hired them to do a complete master planning process for the Racine Mall. And that's why I know that they do this well. They also were the designers that did the Drexel Town Center in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, probably the most successful town center in the greater Milwaukee area. They also designed the Deer District, which is the area around the Milwaukee Bucks' new arena in downtown Milwaukee. And they've also worked with quite a number of communities all across the country in designing similar kinds of destination entertainment facilities, town centers, and redeveloped mall areas. So I think you'll be quite pleased when you see the kind of work that they complete.
I see our cheesehead Chief Burke back there nodding. He's familiar with these town centers in Wisconsin. This seems like the result of a lot of hard work on behalf of, and hitting the ground running on behalf of both Mr. Palahniuk and Ms. Lyons, and I really applaud your efforts on this one. I think it's a great idea.
And I'm sorry, I don't think I noted, the funds that we'll be using they exist within our approved fiscal year 2020 budget. So it's going to come out of the economic development, other performance services or other professional services, and then the city manager's other professional services. And then, of course, our two partners will contribute the remainder. So this is entirely within the budget. We don't need any additional appropriation of funding to accomplish this.
Any other comments from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vittori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Okay, with that, that concludes our meeting. We'll next meet on the 17th of November at 5:30 p.m. here in council chambers. And until then, blue skies over Middletown.